Do you volunteer or serve your community in some way? Do you do good? Well, it's great if you do, but have you ever stopped to wonder who you're actually helping, whose interests you're really serving? Is it possible that right down deep, buried at the bottom of your generosity, there's lurking more than a little self-interest? It's an uncomfortable question, and one that I'm discussing over the phone this week with Catherine Yap, a Sydney-based journalist and TV producer. Stay tuned.
This is Signs of the Times Radio with Kent Kingston.
I'm here with Catherine Yap, who wrote a great article in this month's Signs of the Times magazine, the July issue. Thanks for being with us, Catherine.
Thanks for having me on, Kent. It's good to be here.
Now, you chose a really interesting title for your article, which is Feeding the Homeless or the Ego. And I guess I just wondered, what sparked off the idea for this article and for you to explore that question?
Sure. So I alluded in the article to a post on Facebook, which actually was a black and white image and had the text, "If you want to feed the homeless, then feed the homeless." But the moment you post it on social media, you're also feeding your ego. And I actually saw that on a Facebook friends wall and noticed that quite a few people were commenting on it and going, yes, that's so true, totally agree with that. As soon as you're posting charity or anything on social media, you're feeding your ego. And that was just such a big shock for me, because I've always seen it as a way to gain awareness of what you're doing or to inspire people about it and encourage them to join in. And I guess I was so surprised by the reaction that this post had gotten that I thought I'd write an article in response.
Okay, so you sort of had the impression before this point that, well, if you're doing some good, well, of course you would sort of share what you're doing with other people. It's, to celebrate what you're doing as well as to perhaps encourage other people to do something similar. Is that what you're saying?
Absolutely, and I don't know whether it was naive on my part, but I guess when I see people share something that they've done, I think, hey, that's really great, maybe I should think about doing it. And because it inspires me, I just kind of assume that everyone else has the same intentions.
Okay, but I guess you found when you started exploring this that there were a few people who are raising similar sorts of concerns. You came across this term, you mentioned in your article, Humblebrag. Where did this come from? What does it mean?
So apparently the Humblebrag was a term coined by the American comedy writer Harris Whittles, who's passed away now, and he used the term to describe a brag that allows you to be falsely humble, which sounds like an oxymoron, but it tends to be someone who says that they've done something and makes it sound like a good thing, but at the same time they manage to do it in what seems like a humble sort of way.
Okay, I'm remembering a song I used to hear people sing when I was a kid, oh Lord, it's hard to be humble when you're perfect in every way. Does that sort of link with what you're talking about?
Exactly, that would be the perfect example of a humble brag.
Okay, I think you mentioned in your article that there are some celebrities in particular who have really nailed this and do it very well and manage to sound extremely humble and self-deprecating while just happening to drop that they were over at George Clooney's house the other day, or they were an ambassador for World Vision or something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. And the worst humble braggers used to be celebrities, but it's actually now, the so-called ordinary people. Like, we're the ones who are actually doing this too. And I don't know whether it's because we've learned it from celebrities or if it's just something that we've been doing all along and now people are starting to pick up on it.
I wonder if it's a cultural thing. I mean, I know that the USA, for example, has a very strong culture of philanthropy and, lots of very, posh black tie fundraising events and all that sort of thing. Whereas in Australia, by comparison, we don't seem to quite have that culture. But is this something that perhaps we might have picked up from the US, do you think, Kath?
I think it's something that's definitely becoming more popular here in Australia too. I mean, I'm not sure how much you sort of travel those circles, Ken, but I think it's becoming more and more popular to have those sort of black tie, charge $100 per head to go attend this board to raise money for a special cause.
Try 15,000, I think, for some of them.
Well, yeah, 15,000. I mean, it depends which sort of causes you're supporting, but definitely I think the trend is starting to come to Australia now too. It's very much here.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. What about yourself, Kath? Are you involved in, what might be termed, doing good? I mean, I guess after having this conversation, you might be a bit shy telling us about it. We won't consider you to be humble bragging, but I guess I'd just be interested to know, have you been involved in any sort of volunteer work or reaching out to people who are, perhaps struggling and how you felt about doing that?
Sure, Kent, and like you've promised, please don't hold this against me. But yes, I think from an early age, my mum was always involved in volunteering, and she was always interested in helping other people and doing special projects in the community. And I think it was from her that I got interested in volunteering and being part of the community. And I think pretty much ever since I was a teenager until recently, and I still do. I've always been very interested in volunteering work and helping people where I can.
Okay, so what sort of specific activities are you talking about?
So I've done a few different things. I've helped raise money for certain causes, so the Red Cross, Adventist Development and Relief Agency, which is a charitable organisation. I've also tutored kids from disadvantaged backgrounds. I've been involved in raising funds for people going overseas, op shops, that kind of thing.
No, that sounds really good. I mean, and you're right. Like a journalist and a TV producer, and have a pretty busy life, but you still find time to do that sort of thing. Like, why do you do it? What motivates you?
Well, I think two reasons, Kent. I think, firstly, I just have this belief that we're in this world to not only be here for ourselves, but to help other people as well. And I think that anybody, who has the capacity and who has the means to be able to help others should. And I think that stems from the second belief, which really is my primary belief, that being a Christian, that I believe that God actually wants us to be helping other people and to be treating them in the way that we would like to be treated.
Yeah, okay, fair enough. I wonder though, if in the process of doing these fundraisers, helping out this or that charity, tutoring kids, have you ever sort of stepped back and done a little bit of sort of navel gazing and wondered to yourself, are my motives in doing this really, genuinely 100% altruistic, or is there a selfish aspect to what I'm doing here?
Have you ever watched the show Friends, Kent? Are you familiar with the show?
I have from time to time, yes.
I just happen to remember one particular episode that sort of illustrates what we're talking about. And Joey is telling Phoebe, there's no such thing as a 100% altruistic good deed. Like everything we do, there's always some sort of special motive or there's some sort of, intention behind it. And she's so determined to prove him wrong. And she starts doing all these things only to have him knock her back at every chance and go, well, this is the reason why you're doing it. And she finally thinks she's come up with the perfect plan and she donates money to an organisation that she can't stand in order to help prove that she is willing to do things that aren't for any selfish personal reason. But her donation actually gets Joey on TV, and she's so excited about that. And then she suddenly realises, oh no, that means there really was a selfish intention behind my good deed. And look, I'll be honest, Ken, I think there are times when I look back at some of the things I've done and I feel satisfied. I feel happy that I've been involved in them, you know. I will, for example, see one of my kids has done really well on an exam, and I'll think, hey, you know, I played a little part in that. And I think there is probably a little bit of that, you know, I'm really happy that I got to be part of it, motivation in there. But I think you can have both. I think that you can be happy that you've helped someone, but at the same time go in there for genuine reasons.
Okay, so you're saying it's okay. It's okay if your motives aren't just purely altruistic and purely thinking of the other person. It's okay to recognise from the outset that you are personally getting something out of this yourself.
I think it's pretty hard to do any sort of good deed without getting something from it yourself, whether you set out to or not. It just is something that is a natural. I think you are naturally blessed as a consequence of helping other people. I don't think that's necessarily something that you go in and seek, but it's sort of a natural consequence of what happens.
Mm-hmm. I guess I wonder if it's something that we perhaps at least subconsciously seek when we go to do something like that. You know, we have a sense that, hey, I am going to feel good about this. I'm going to have a warm feeling inside, a sense of accomplishment, a sense that I'm a good person. And even if it's not something that we openly admit to ourselves, you know, perhaps it is something that is going on at least subconsciously.
It's probably something that is happening subconsciously, Ken. But when you think of all the actions that people could be doing in this world in order to feed their egos, might you not as well be doing something that helps people at the same time?
Yeah, and I guess that's a question. You know, can you do achieve you know, moral results by using possibly methods of that involve mixed or dubious motivations? It gets difficult. I remember something that Jesus said in the Gospels, and I'll just sort of paraphrase it. He said, "When you give to the poor, your left hand should not know what your right hand is doing." He said, you know, it should be in secret. He says, don't be like those hypocrites who, you know, blow trumpets on the street corners and give over their donation, you know, so that everyone can see. He says those people, they've had their reward. But yeah, he recommended sort of giving in secret and doing good in secret. How does that idea strike you?
Sure. Look, I've always said that Jesus is the ultimate secret serviceman because he was all about giving in secret. I remember hearing a joke once about a man who received a tax receipt from his church which said that he had given no money to the church the previous year, and he got outraged because he said he was obeying scripture by, and quoting that very verse that you just mentioned, he thought that giving was to be so secret that even he shouldn't know how much money he was giving. I think definitely it's got some good points. I think that, of course, we shouldn't be doing these things in order to receive human approval, because we're not going to necessarily get approval from humans. And I think that's shown by the fact that there are Facebook posts telling you that you're feeding your ego if you put things up on Facebook, you know. We're not necessarily getting men's praises by doing what we want. And I think it's telling us that we should be ultimately looking for God's approval, that God is the one who is ultimately seeing our deeds, whether we do them in public or whether we do them in secret. And that's not to say that God cares only about what we do in terms of our actions, but I think it's a way of reminding us that the primary reason that we're doing this is for other people and not for ourselves.
Yeah, I have to admit, Catherine, that there are times when I see a new wing of the library that's, sort of named after some Christian philanthropist, or there's, there's the picture in the paper with the giant check, and, all the people around, with champagne and everything. And I wonder, boy, doesn't this just go completely against that principle that Jesus tried to establish there, that our generosity shouldn't be something about, it shouldn't be about self-aggrandizement. Genuine generosity is actually about serving someone else, not making yourself look good.
Sure. But I think at the same time, we've got to realize that there are people out there who watch what we do. And it goes in regards to prayer, for example. Jesus also did say to pray in secret, but I mean, a lot of us are still praying in public, or still praying in church at least. So I think it's saying that we shouldn't brag about the things that we're doing, but at the same time, I don't think we should be covering it up. Because if we're not willing to openly and humbly, discuss the opportunities that there are to give back to the community and the ways that we can be involved, how can we expect to raise up other people, who will be inspired and who will see opportunities to give and who will learn how to do good deeds because of what you've done? I think that it is a motivation, it is showing people that, hey, we as a church, we believe in giving back. We believe in generous giving, and here are the actions that go along with those words. So I don't think it's necessarily about covering things up, and I think it's more about having the right motives where we can, and also inspiring other people to do good through what we do. Not because of who we are, but because of what Jesus has shared with us.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. And I wonder if this is why you picked a particular historical figure in your article, and that is Elizabeth Fry. Tell us about her.
So I'm actually quite surprised, because there's a lot of people who I've mentioned Elizabeth Fry to, and I would say probably about 95% haven't heard about her. And she was actually one of my childhood heroes, because I loved reading books about people who made a positive difference as a child, and she was very much one. She was a philanthropist, she was a social reformer, and she was born in 1780. She was visiting the Newgate prison in London, and she was really horrified, by the conditions of the female prisoners and their children there. And she came back with food and clothes, eventually taught the female prisoners how to sew and how to read and how to earn money for themselves. She became the first woman at the House of Commons to talk about the horrific condition of British prisons. And she wasn't content to sort of leave these issues for the men of the Parliament to sort out. She went on tours to highlight the work that she was doing. She inspired the King of Prussia and Queen Victoria to both visit and see the humanitarian work that she was doing, and also contribute financially to her cause. So she, I think, was a great example of someone who was able to do charitable causes and good deeds, but also bring publicity and awareness to them, because she knew that that would bring on board people who had the influence to help her make a difference.
Wow, and so I guess through her influence there were improvements in prison conditions, I assume?
Absolutely. So, as I mentioned, she taught them how to sew, how to read, how to be financially independent. The prison conditions improved vastly. And she also did work with the homeless, so she established night shelters where they could stay.
Okay, and that is really interesting, because I think even to this day, the idea of prison conditions is not something that's a real vote winner. It's not something that gets a whole lot of the public profile. We don't see, even today, a lot of public campaigns about this. And yeah, it's fascinating to see that I guess the relatively humane conditions that we do have in prisons weren't achieved by accident, but they were actually achieved by someone who gave charitably and then was able to do some social campaigning and some powerful advocacy.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so I guess that's the Elizabeth Fry historically. What about today? Are you aware of people or organisations who you feel are getting the balance right? When it comes to giving selflessly, but are still, able to highlight their generosity, highlight their successes in ways that, you would sort of say, hey, they've got the balance right?
Look, I would probably hesitate to name anyone because now at this stage I feel like maybe I'd be feeding some egos. But definitely, I think there are charitable organisations and individuals out there who are doing a good job of both promoting what they're doing and also trying to bring awareness to the cause that they have. So, for example, there are a number of non-profit charity organisations who I think do a really good job of not only showing who they're helping, but also taking the initiative to help the local people become self-sufficient. So they're not going over there and going overseas and just running trips for the sake of it, but they're actually taking measures to employ the local people, help them find jobs, help them become financially independent, and I think that's a really good thing.
Yeah, it must be interesting, like being an NGO doing that sort of work, because you have to constantly, I guess, sort of justify your existence, to people. It's a very busy, crowded market out there. I mean, you mentioned ADRA before, and I know there was a time when ADRA was, very hardcore about, 100% of our donations go to the projects we're supporting. And while they were doing that, they lost more and more of the public's awareness of what they were doing, and they really had to, do a rethink and say, hey, we actually have to do some marketing of our projects. We have to let people know the good work we're doing, because basically the other NGOs are vacuuming up the donations, and people just don't even know we exist. And it must be tough to get that right. And then I guess you've got to be working in these communities with these people who are disadvantaged. But really, the ultimate measure of your success is that you're able to leave that community behind and say, hey, the job has been done here. These people are now self-sufficient. These people now have access to, clean water, healthcare, education, whatever it is, and our work here is done. And it's not the sort of success story that you hear from NGOs. Usually, you hear about the needs and the desperate plight of people rather than the successes. But the successes do happen.
Absolutely, Ken, and you're right. I mean, a big part of any sort of non-profit organisation to raise awareness for their cause is marketing. And I guess you can look at it from a cynical perspective and go, well, if they had such a great cause, they wouldn't have to market it. But the truth is, unless they market it, there's no way with the amount of things that we see in social media that we're actually going to take time to block out everything else and look at a particular video or a particular story. I think storytelling, it's a great way of raising awareness for your cause, but it has to not only be a great story, it has to be the way that it's told, whether it's, a nice polished video, or whether it's a beautifully cut sort of article. Whatever it is, it's got to be something that catches people's attention in order for it to raise awareness.
Yeah, and there are ethical issues there. I mean, people use phrases like, poverty porn, for example. I guess there's a way in which people who are supposed to be the beneficiaries of these projects actually basically end up being, exploited, and their situation ends up being, somehow, fetishized in order to basically pull heartstrings. And I'm really glad to see that so many NGOs are aware of that now, and I guess trying to steer away from those extremes and those sort of dubious methods.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think, don't get me wrong, I think there's still probably a lot of people out there who are going about the wrong way in how they market their causes, but I think there are so many people who are also doing it right. And the unfortunate thing is, when you have a post like this, if you want to feed the homeless, but the moment you're putting it on social media, you're also feeding your ego. I think that's unfortunately turning a lot of people off the very real need to raise awareness for certain causes.
Yeah, it's a complex issue, isn't it? Thank you very much for your time today, Catherine Yap, and thanks for writing this article for us. We really appreciate that.
You're very welcome, Kent. I hope it starts a conversation.
Yeah, me too. And look, our listeners will probably remember that a couple of weeks ago we had Darren Morton on Signs of the Times Radio, and he was talking about his new book, Live More Happy. One of the strategies that he talked about for a meaningful, flourishing life is he writes a chapter in his book entitled Giving is Living, where he actually said, generosity and giving and charity is actually one of the secrets to living a happy life. And I think that's very consistent with what Catherine and I have been talking about in this episode. But I'd just like to mention that book again because basically if you, our listener, would like to subscribe to Signs of the Times magazine or increase your subscription, perhaps to get a second subscription to share with someone else, we can send you out a copy of that book, Live More Happy by Dr. Darren Morton, for no extra charge. So that's great. Jump on our website, which is signsofthetimes.org.au, and check out your subscription options there. So thank you very much, Catherine Yap, for your time for this episode.
My pleasure. Thanks, Kent.
Today's episode was based on an article appearing in this month's Signs of the Times magazine. A subscription is just $26 for 11 issues a year. To find out more, visit signsofthetimes.org.au. Signs of the Times has been published in Australia since 1886 and is proudly produced by Adventist Media.
This is an Adventist Media podcast.